Dust devils swirled across the dry earth, spinning their lonely dance through the sagebrush and scattered juniper. In the distance, the towering peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains stood like ancient sentinels, their snow-capped summits remaining defiant against the blistering summer sun. Fort Sumner loomed like a scar on the land, a sprawling compound of adobe walls and wooden barracks, housing 300 soldiers and the iron will of Sheriff Bartholomew Cole. The fort was more than just a military outpost. It was a bold declaration, a fist clenched tight against the throat of a land that refused to be tamed. Inside the sheriff's mansion, the largest building within the fort's walls, Clara Hayes stood by her bedroom window, her fingers pressed against the glass as if she could push through it and fly away. At 23, educated at the finest schools in Boston and Philadelphia, she possessed the refined beauty expected of a sheriff's daughter. Golden hair swept into an intricate updo, waist cinched tightly by expensive corsets, skin shielded from the harsh sun by parasols and wide-brimmed hats. But beneath the silk and propriety, Clara's heart beat with a wildness that terrified her father. "Miss Clara, your father expects you for tea in 30 minutes. Mora." Estelle, her long-suffering maid, said from the doorway, her voice soft with understanding. Clara didn't turn from the window. Beyond the fort's walls, the land stretched on, endlessly broken only by canyons and mesas that held secrets she was desperate to uncover. "Tell him I have a headache," Clara said softly. "I told him that yesterday," Miss Mora replied gently, a smile touching her lips. "You're a terrible liar, Miss Clara." "I appreciate the effort," Clara murmured, her gaze distant. "He's arranging another introduction, Mora. Colonel Ward's son arrived from Washington this morning." The words fell like heavy stones, and Clara's reflection in the glass showed her own resignation. Another parade of suitable men, each one more insufferable than the last. Officers with neatly trimmed mustaches and empty eyes, sons of merchants who saw her as a trophy. Nephews of politicians who calculated every word before speaking. "I won't do it," Clara whispered. "Not today." An hour later, as her father entertained guests with brandy and tales of military conquest, Clara slipped through the servants' entrance, dressed in a simple cotton dress and her brother's old riding boots. Her mare Stellar stood in the small stable reserved for the sheriff's personal horses, a beautiful chestnut with a white star on her forehead, and a knowing glint in her eyes that Clara had never found in any human. The guard at the side gate barely glanced at her. Everyone knew the sheriff's daughter took her afternoon rides. What they didn't know was how far she went, or that she had discovered a place where the world fell away, leaving only beauty in its wake. Clara rode hard, letting the wind whip through her hair, pins scattering across the desert floor. She followed a path known only to her, through a narrow canyon with walls rising red and gold on either side, then up through a grove of cottonwoods that whispered secrets in a language older than any words she knew. The waterfall revealed itself slowly, like a gift unwrapped bit by bit. First came the sound, a distant murmur that grew to a roar, then the coolness in the air, a welcome relief from the desert heat. Finally, the sight itself, water cascading from a stone ledge 30 feet above into a pool so clear Clara could see every pebble on the bottom. This was Clara's sanctuary. She had found it 6 months ago during one of her increasingly desperate escapes, and had told no one, not Mora, not the other officers' daughters, who occasionally invited her to their tedious tea parties, and certainly not her father. She dismounted, tying Stellar to a low branch where the mare could graze on tender grass. The air here tasted different, sweeter, freer. Clara pulled off her boots, then hesitated only a moment before unbuttoning her dress. Propriety had no place here. There was no one to see, no one to judge. The water embraced her like a blessing, cold enough to make her gasp, but perfect after the heat of the day. She dove under, opening her eyes to watch sunlight dance through the ripples above. When she surfaced, she floated on her back, staring at the sky, imagining a life beyond Fort Sumner and arranged marriages. What she didn't know was that she was being watched. Zane Wolf had seen her before. 3 times now this white woman had come to the waterfall, his waterfall, the sacred place where his mother had brought him as a child to teach him the old prayers. He should have been angry at the intrusion, should have driven her away or reported her presence to the other Apache scouts who still roamed freely through these mountains despite the soldiers' attempts to control every inch of the land. But something stopped him each time. He watched from his position in the rocks above, hidden behind a screen of juniper branches. She moved through the water with unself-conscious grace. Her golden hair spread around her like sunlight made tangible. Most white women he had encountered were stiff, frightened creatures, flinching at shadows and clutching their skirts, as if modesty were armor. This one was different. Zane was 30 years old, considered young for a war leader, but already legendary among his people. They called him Zane Wolf for his ability to move unseen through any terrain, to strike without warning and vanish like smoke. The soldiers had their own name for him, Ghost Wolf, the Apache warrior who couldn't be caught or killed. He was beautiful in the way desert predators are, lean muscle and lethal grace. His hair, black as midnight, fell past his shoulders, bound back with a strip of leather. His face was all sharp angles, and fierce pride marked by a thin scar running from his left temple to his jaw, a gift from a cavalry saber during a raid 2 years ago. He wore simple buckskin leggings and a vest, his feet encased in knee-high moccasins that allowed him to run for hours across terrain that would destroy an ordinary man. At his side hung a knife with a bone handle, its blade honed to razor sharpness. A rifle rested beside him, taken from a soldier who no longer needed it. Zane told himself he stayed to ensure she didn't discover the narrow cave entrance behind the waterfall, a secret passage his people had used for generations. He told himself he was simply being cautious, watching a potential threat, but deep down, he knew he was lying. There was something about her that stirred something in him, a part of his spirit that recognized hers despite the vast differences between them. It disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. She climbed out of the water, stepping onto a flat rock and wringing out her hair. Droplets caught the light, creating momentary rainbows. She tilted her face to the sun, and Zane saw something in her expression that shocked him, the same desperate hunger for freedom that lived in his own chest. He should leave, should return to his camp in the high mountains where his band waited for news of soldier movements. He should forget this white woman existed. Instead, he shifted his weight, and a stone came loose beneath his foot. The sound was small, barely a click of rock against rock. But Clara's head snapped up, her eyes scanning the canyon walls with sudden alertness. Zane froze, but it was too late. Her gaze locked with his across 30 feet of empty air. Time stopped. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone at the fort knew about the Apache warriors who still resisted, who struck without warning and vanished into the mountains. She'd seen the fear in the soldiers' eyes when they returned from patrols, seen the way they jumped at shadows. But no story had prepared her for this. The man standing above her was magnificent. There was no other word. The afternoon sun turned his skin to burnished copper, highlighting the powerful lines of his body. But it was his face that held her captive, fierce and proud. With eyes so dark they seemed to hold all the mysteries of the desert night. They should both have moved. She should have screamed, grabbed her clothes, run for her horse. He should have disappeared into the rocks, maintaining the invisibility that kept him alive in a land where soldiers hunted his people. Neither of them moved. "Don't be afraid," Zane said, finally. His English was accented, but clear, his voice deep and rough like distant thunder. The words broke the spell. Clara lunged for her dress, pulling it over her wet shift with shaking hands. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons as she backed toward where Stellar waited. "Stay away from me," Clara said. Zane descended from the rocks with liquid grace, moving like water flowing downhill. He made no threatening moves, but his very presence seemed to fill the space around them. "I've been here 3 times when you came. If I wanted to harm you, I would have done it already." Something in his words, or perhaps in his tone, made Clara pause. She looked at him properly now, no longer seeing just an Apache warrior, but an individual person. His face showed intelligence and something else. Curiosity, perhaps. And beneath that, a loneliness that mirrored her own. "You've been watching me," she said, her voice more breathless than accusing. "This is a sacred place for my people. I come here to think." Zane took another step closer, and Clara noticed he moved with his hands visible clearly, showing he held no weapon. "You're the sheriff's daughter, Clara Hayes." Hearing her name on his lips sent a strange shiver down her spine. "You know who I am." "Everyone knows who you are." The beautiful bird in the golden cage, Zane said, his eyes holding hers. "But you fly here sometimes." "Why?" The question was so unexpected, so direct, that Clara answered honestly. "Because I can breathe here. Because for a few hours I'm not anyone's daughter or anyone's future wife. I'm just myself." Something shifted in Zane's expression. A recognition, an understanding. "I know that feeling. Do you?" Clara heard the skepticism in her own voice. "You're free. You go where you want. Do what you want." A bitter smile touched his lips. "I'm a war leader. My people depend on me. Every decision I make means life or death for someone. I carry the weight of hundreds of lives, hundreds of expectations. Sometimes I come here because it's the only place where I'm not in a show, but the warrior. I'm just a man." They stood in silence, the waterfall's roar filling the space between them. Clara knew she should leave, knew that every moment spent here increased the danger for both of them. But her feet refused to move. "What do I call you?" she asked finally. "If not Neshoba?" "Zane." "It's what my mother called me," Zane said, studying her face as if memorizing it. "I should go. You should go. This meeting, it's dangerous for both of us." "I know." Neither of them moved. The sun hung low now, painting the canyon walls in shades of amber and rose. Shadows stretched long, turning the world soft and dreamlike. Zane took one more step forward, close enough now that Clara could see the silver flecks in his dark eyes, could smell the sage and leather that clung to him. "Will you come here again?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Clara knew what the answer should be, knew what any sensible person would say. But she was tired of being sensible, tired of doing what was expected. "Yes," she breathed. Zane's hand lifted, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. "Don't," he said softly. "It's not safe. Forget you saw me. Will you forget you saw me?" Their eyes locked again, and Clara saw the answer in his face before he spoke it. "No." Then, like a shadow, slipping into the rocks, he was gone, his fluid movements disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. Clara stood there alone by the waterfall, her heart pounding, her whole world tilted off its axis. She rode back to the fort that evening, barely aware of the path before her. The sun had set by the time she slipped through the side gate, and she endured Mora's anxious scolding with an unusual patience. That night she lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, seeing nothing but dark eyes and a face that held both fierceness and unexpected gentleness. She told herself she would forget, would never return to the waterfall, but deep down she knew she was lying. 4 days passed. 4 days during which Clara attended her father's dinners, smiled at Jake Ward's tedious conversations, and played the role of a dutiful daughter with practiced ease. But every moment, every breath, she counted the hours until she could slip away again. On the 5th day, she made her escape just after noon, claiming she needed to visit the fort's small chapel for private prayer. Mora gave her a knowing look, but said nothing. The ride to the waterfall felt longer this time, every minute stretching thin with anticipation and fear. What if he wasn't there? What if he was? Clara's mind spun with possibilities, none of them sensible. The canyon appeared before her, and she urged Stellar through the narrow passage. The sound of the falling water grew louder, and her heart began to race. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that he probably wouldn't even be there. But he was. Zane sat on a flat rock near the pool's edge, his rifle resting across his knees, yet his posture relaxed. He looked up as she approached, and something flickered across his face relief. Pleasure. Whatever it was, it made Clara's breath catch. "You came back," he said simply. Clara dismounted, her hands shaking slightly as she tied Stellar's reins. "I told you I would," she said quietly. "White people don't usually keep their word, not to Apache," he added, bitterness lacing his voice. Clara flinched, but she understood it. She'd heard her father and his officers talk about the Indian problem, about breaking treaties and forcing relocations. She'd been taught that it was all for the greater good, for civilization and progress. Standing here, looking at Zane, those justifications felt hollow. "I'm not here representing white people," Clara said quietly. "I'm just myself." Zane studied her for a long moment, then gestured to the rock beside him. An invitation. Clara's heart hammered as she crossed the space between them and sat down, careful to leave a few feet of distance. They sat in silence, at first watching the waterfall. The late afternoon sun cast shifting patterns of light and shadow on the water's surface. A hawk, a real one, circled overhead, its cry echoing off the canyon walls. "Is that your namesake?" Clara asked, pointing at the bird. Zane nodded. "My mother said I was born when a red-tailed hawk landed on our wickiup. She said it was a sign that I would fly higher than other men, see farther." His voice softened with memory. "She died when I was 12. I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, but Clara didn't know what else to say. "My mother died when I was 10, she added. "Fever." They both watched the hawk disappear behind the canyon rim. "What was she like, Lark?" "Your mother?" Clara asked the question, rising in her chest like a memory she had never shared. No one at the fort had ever asked about her mother. It was as though she'd been erased, replaced by the general's new focus on military matters. Zane spoke with a quiet pride. "She was kind, gentle. She used to read me poetry and tell me stories about when she was young, before she married my father. She loved horses, rode better than any man I've ever seen." Clara smiled at the memory. "She taught me to ride, said a woman should know how to run if she needed to." Zane's voice held a trace of admiration. "A wise woman." "Yes. My father loved her, I think. But after she died, he became harder, more rigid. It's like he decided feeling anything was weakness, so he just stopped." Zane was quiet for a moment, and then his voice grew heavy. "My father was killed by soldiers when I was 16. Bluecoats came to our camp while the men were hunting. They were looking for a war party that had raided a settlement. We had nothing to do with it, but they didn't care. My father tried to reason with them, to show them we were peaceful." Zane's jaw tightened. "They shot him anyway." The raw pain in his voice hit Clara like a fist. "Hawk, That was when I became a warrior," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "When I understood that no amount of peace would save us, that we had to fight or die." He turned to face her fully. "Your father led that raid." The words dropped between them like a stone sinking into still water. Clara felt the world beneath her tilt. What Sheriff Bartholomew Cole? He was a captain then, leading a punitive expedition. He gave the order to fire. Zane's voice was flat, factual. "I was there. I saw him." Clara's hands went numb. She thought of her father, cold, distant, but still her father. She tried to reconcile that man with one who would order unarmed people killed. It was horrifying, but she realized she could. "Why are you telling me this?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Because you should know who your father is." Zane said, his voice low but steady, and because his hand hovered near hers on the rock between them. "I want there to be truth between us, even if there can't be anything else." Clara looked at their hands, so close but not touching, separated by inches, by everything their worlds represented. She knew she should pull away, should stand up and leave and never come back. But instead, she closed the distance, letting her fingers brush against his. The contact sent a jolt through her. Zane's hand turned palm up and Clara laid hers in it. His skin was warm and calloused, his grip gentle despite the strength in his fingers. "This is madness," he said softly. "I know. There's no future in it. Only pain. I know." Then why Clara turned to meet his eyes. "Because for the first time in my life I feel truly alive." Zane's voice was raw, vulnerable. "Because when I'm here with you, I'm not afraid of the future. I'm not trapped. I'm just here. Now. Real." Zane's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "I told myself I wouldn't come back. That you were the sheriff's daughter, the enemy forbidden in every way possible." His eyes searched hers. "But I couldn't stay away." The sun was lower now, the shadows longer. Soon Clara would have to return to the fort, to her life of suffocating propriety and empty conversations. But not yet. For this moment she was exactly where she wanted to be. "Tell me about your world," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "About the mountains, the old ways. Tell me everything." And so Zane did. He spoke of his childhood in the high country, of learning to track and hunt, of the stories the elders told around night fires. He described the changing seasons in the mountains, the way snow fell silently, like prayers, the spring when wildflowers carpeted the meadows in purple and gold. Clara listened enchanted. She asked questions, and Zane answered with a patience that surprised even him. He found himself telling her things he'd never shared with anyone, his doubts about the endless fighting, his fears for his people's future, his desperate wish that there could be peace without surrender. In turn, she told him about her suffocating life at the fort, about the expectations pressing down on her like physical weight. She described her love of reading, how she'd smuggled forbidden books, novels, and poetry her father considered inappropriate, and read them by candlelight. She confessed her terror of becoming like the other officers' wives, brittle women who gossiped and drank tea, slowly dying of boredom. The sun touched the canyon rim, and still they talked. Clara knew she was late, knew there would be consequences, but she couldn't bring herself to care. Finally, as the light began to fade, Zane stood. "You need to go before it's full dark." Clara rose reluctantly, her hands slipping from his. The loss of contact felt like a physical ache. "When will I see you again?" she asked. "You shouldn't." His voice was firm, but his eyes told a different story. "This is already too dangerous. But will you be here if I come back?" Zane looked at her for a long moment, and Clara saw the war raging behind his eyes, duty versus desire, caution versus recklessness. "Yes," he said finally. "Heavens help me, yes." Clara smiled, a real smile, the first genuine one she'd worn in weeks. She mounted Stella, looking down at him from the saddle. 3 days, she said. "I'll come back in 3 days." Zane nodded already, stepping back into the shadows. "Be careful, Clara Hayes." "You too, Zane." She rode away without looking back, knowing that if she did, she might not have the strength to leave at all. Behind her, Zane stood watching until horse and rider disappeared around the canyon bend, feeling something he'd thought long dead stir in his chest. Hope. Dangerous. Foolish. Inevitable hope. The fort was in an uproar when Clara returned. Torches flickered in the courtyard, casting long shadows across the ground, while soldiers moved about with swift urgency. Clara's heart sank when she saw her father standing on the mansion's front steps, his face as hard as stone. "Where have you been?" Sheriff Bartholomew Cole's voice could have frozen water. Clara dismounted, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. "Writing. I lost track of time. 6 hours in Apache territory." He descended the steps slowly, each step deliberate and heavy with authority. "There was an incident today," he said, his voice cold. "A supply wagon was attacked 15 miles from here. 3 men dead." The words hit Clara like a punch to the gut. She thought of Zane, of his gentle hands and quiet voice. Tried to reconcile that man with one who would kill soldiers, found disturbingly that she could understand both versions of him. She began to understand the complexity of this war, one that wasn't really a war at all, but a conflict where everyone believed they were defending their right to exist. I was perfectly safe, Father. I stayed away from the roads. You will not leave the fort again without an armed escort. His tone left no room for argument. Do you understand me, Clara? For once, Clara didn't fight. She nodded meekly, accepting his anger, then escaped to her room as quickly as possible. Only once she was alone did she allow herself to tremble. 3 men dead. 3 soldiers with families, perhaps. Or perhaps men like her father, hard men, who'd done hard things in the name of duty. She didn't know which truth was worse. Mora brought dinner to her room, her expression soft with knowing. Your father's posted guards at all the gates, she said, setting the tray down. You won't be slipping out again anytime soon. I know. Clara's voice was flat. Mora hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. Whatever you're doing, whatever you found out there, it needs to stop. I've seen that look before on girls who thought they were in love with the wrong man. It never ends well. Clara wanted to protest, to say it wasn't like that, but the words didn't come. She was terrified that Mora was right. The next 3 days were torture. Clara went through the motions of daily life, smiling at her father's guests, attending the commander's dinner, suffering through an excruciating conversation with Jake Ward, who seemed to think discussing military strategy was appropriate courting behavior. But every moment she thought of the waterfall of Zane waiting for her, wondering if she'd broken her promise. The image haunted her, him sitting on that rock, watching the trail, slowly realizing she wasn't coming. On the morning of the 4th day, Clara made her decision. She would find a way. She had to. Her opportunity came in the afternoon when her father was called away to deal with a disciplinary matter in the barracks. The guard at the side gate was young, barely 20, with kind eyes and a tendency to blush when she spoke to him. Private Crawford, Clara approached with her most winning smile. I wonder if I might ask a favor. The young soldier straightened. Of course, Miss Hayes. Anything. I left my mother's locket at the chapel yesterday. It's very precious to me, the only thing I have of hers. Clara let her voice tremble slightly. But Father has forbidden me from leaving the compound without an escort, and I can't ask him. He'd say it could wait. Private Crawford's face softened with sympathy. The chapel's just outside the walls, miss. I could fetch it for you. Oh, would you? That would be so kind. Clara described the locket she'd hidden in the chapel weeks ago, knowing this moment might come. It's under the 3rd pew from the front on the left side. The moment Private Crawford was out of sight, Clara moved. She'd already saddled Stella that morning, claiming she wanted to brush the mare. Now, with her heart pounding, she led the horse through the gate. She had maybe 30 minutes before Crawford discovered the deception. It had to be enough. Clara rode harder than she ever had, pushing Stella to her limits. The canyon entrance appeared, and without slowing, she plunged through. Her lungs burned. Her hands ached from gripping the reins, but she didn't stop until the waterfall came into view. Zane was there. He stood as she approached, his face a mixture of relief and alarm. Clara, he said, his voice tight with concern. She practically fell from the saddle, stumbling as her legs protested the brutal ride. Zane caught her, his hands steady on her arms. What happened? Are you hurt? No, she panted. I'm sorry I'm late. Father posted guards. I had to. She couldn't finish breathing too hard. Zane guided her to the rock, making her sit. He knelt before her, his hands still on her arms, his eyes searching her face. You shouldn't have come. Not if it meant putting yourself at risk. I promise. Clara's breath was slowing. I couldn't let you think I'd broken my word. Something softened in Zane's expression, a warmth that transformed his face completely. You took this risk just to keep a promise to me. Yes. His hands slid down her arms to take her hands, his grip gentle but firm. Clara, this has to stop. We both know it. Every time we meet, we're risking both our lives. Your father would have me shot on sight. My people would call me a traitor. And for what? A few stolen moments by a waterfall. Don't say that. Clara's voice was fierce. These aren't just moments, Zane. This is the only time I feel real. The only time I'm not playing a part or wearing a mask. And what happens when we're caught, because we will be eventually. We'll deal with it when it comes. Zane shook his head, but he didn't let go of her hands. You don't understand what they'd do to you. The shame, the scandal. Your father would lock you away, marry you off to the first man who'd take you. His jaw tightened. And me? He paused, his gaze hardening. They'd make an example of me. Public execution, probably. A warning to other Apache who might think about trusting white people. The images his words conjured made Clara's stomach clench, but she didn't pull away. Then tell me to stop coming, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Say you don't want to see me again. Make me believe it. I can't. The words seemed torn from him. I've tried. For days I've told myself to stay away, to forget you exist. But I can't. They sat in silence, the roar of the waterfall filling the space between them, both knowing they were balanced on the edge of something that would change their lives forever. Tell me about the attack, Clara said finally. The supply wagon. Were you there? Zane's eyes hardened slightly. No, that was Flint's band from the north. They're younger, angrier. They don't believe in restraint anymore. Did you? Clara had to force the words out. Have you killed soldiers? Yes. He didn't flinch from the admission. In battle, when they've come into our territory or attacked our camps. Never any who weren't armed and looking for a fight. My father has killed your people. Unarmed people. Yes. The single word hung between them, heavy with all the history and bloodshed that should have made this moment impossible. But somehow, sitting here with their hands intertwined, Clara found she could hold both truths at once. Could see Zane as a warrior and as a man who'd shown her nothing but gentleness. Could see her father as both parent and perpetrator of violence. There has to be a way, she whispered, a path that doesn't end in blood. If there is, I haven't found it, Zane said softly, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. But I want to. For the first time in years, I want to believe in something other than endless war. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, and Clara knew her time was running out, but she couldn't bring herself to leave, not yet. Tell me something, she said, something true, something you've never told anyone. Zane considered her request, his dark eyes thoughtful. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet that she had to lean in to hear him. I'm tired, he said, his voice low. He said tired of fighting, tired of watching my people die, tired of being afraid that every sunrise might be my last. I'm 30 years old, he continued, and I feel ancient. Sometimes I dream of a different life, a simple one where I could wake up in the same place every morning, where the biggest worry would be whether there's enough firewood for winter. His words pierced Clara's heart. She squeezed his hands. I dream of that too. A small house somewhere with windows I could leave open. A garden, books, peace. We're both dreamers then. Foolish dreamers. Perhaps Clara managed to smile, but perhaps dreaming is the bravest thing we can do. Zane lifted one hand to her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, with infinite gentleness. You're like no one I've ever met, Clara Hayes. White Apache man-woman. No one. You're singular. The touch sent shivers down her spine. Clara turned her face into his palm, her eyes closing. As are you. When she opened her eyes again, his face was closer. She could see the silver flecks in his dark irises, could count his eyelashes. His breath was warm on her lips. We shouldn't, he murmured, even as his other hand came up to cradle her face. I know, Clara whispered. This will only make everything harder. I know. But neither of them pulled away. The moment stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. And then Clara never knew which of them moved first. Their lips met. The kiss was soft at first, tentative. Both of them aware they were crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But then, Zane's hands tightened in her hair and Clara's arms wound around his neck. Gentleness gave way to something fiercer, more desperate. This was more than attraction, more than rebellion or escape. This was recognition. Two souls finding their mirror in the most impossible place. When they finally broke apart, both of them. Breathing hard, Zane rested his forehead against hers. His eyes closed. This changes everything. Yes. I don't know how to protect you. Don't know how to make this right. Clara pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. Then don't. Don't try to plan, or protect, or fix. Just be here with me, for as long as we can. Zane searched her face and Clara saw the moment he surrendered, saw the war leader fade into the man beneath the one who'd been alone for too long and now desperately wanted to believe in something good. I need to tell you something, he said finally, and you need to listen. Truly listen. Clara nodded, her heart beginning to race again. My people are planning something, a last stand of sorts. There are bands gathering in the high country, Apache from different tribes united in a way we haven't been in years. They're talking about a coordinated attack on the forts, including yours. The words hit Clara like a bucket of ice water. When I don't know? Weeks, maybe a month? The councils are still meeting. Zane's hands gripped her shoulders. I'm telling you this because I need you to be ready. Need you to have an escape plan if things go wrong. You're part of it. Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. The planning. I'm a war leader. They expect me to be, he said, his voice heavy. But my heart's not in it anymore. He broke off, but his eyes told her what his words didn't. Not since you. Clara felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. If she told her father what Zane had revealed, she could save lives, soldier lives. But she would be condemning Zane and his people to death or imprisonment. If she stayed silent, men at the fort might die. Men she knew who had been kind to her. There was no right answer, no choice that wouldn't haunt her soul. Don't tell your father, Zane said, reading her face. I shouldn't have told you at all. I just needed you to know, to be prepared. How can I not tell him? People will die. People are already dying, have been dying for decades. This war didn't start with one battle, and it won't end with one either. Zane's voice was bitter. Your father's soldiers have killed dozens of my people. Women, children, elders. You think Apache attacks happen in a vacuum? We're fighting for our survival. Clara wanted to argue to defend her father and his men, but she couldn't. Not when she knew deep in her bones that Zane was right. This conflict had no heroes and villains, only people trying desperately to survive. I won't tell him, she said finally. But you have to promise me something, anything. When it happens, stay away from my father. Don't lead the attack on Fort Sumner. She gripped his arms. Please, Zane. I can't lose you, and I can't watch you kill my father, or watch him kill you. Zane's jaw tightened, but finally he nodded. I'll speak to the other leaders. Try to convince them to focus elsewhere. It wasn't enough. Couldn't be enough. But it was all they had. The sun was now touching the canyon rim, painting everything in shades of crimson and gold. Clara knew she'd already been gone too long, that there would be consequences waiting for her back at the fort. But she couldn't bring herself to care. I have to go, she said reluctantly. I know. But instead of pulling away, Zane drew her close again. Wrapping his arms around her, Clara buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in the scent of sage leather and something uniquely him. She felt his lips press against her hair, felt the tremor that ran through his body. Be careful, he whispered. Be so careful, my beautiful dreamer. You too. Clara pulled back just enough to kiss him again, this time slow and deep, trying to memorize the taste of him, the feel of his hands in her hair. When they finally broke apart, the last light of the day was fading from the sky. Clara forced herself to stand, to mount Stella and turn the horse toward home. At the canyon entrance, she looked back. Zane stood by the waterfall, his hand raised in farewell. The dying light turned him into a shadow, a ghost, a dream she might have imagined. But Clara knew he was real, knew that everything between them was real, no matter how impossible. She rode back to face whatever punishment awaited her, her lips still tingling from his kiss, her heart full of a wild, terrifying hope. The consequences were severe. Sheriff Bartholomew Cole confined Clara to her room for a week, posting a guard outside her door. Colonel Ward's son was politely informed that Miss Hayes was indisposed. The fort buzzed with rumors, some saying the general's daughter had fallen ill, while others whispered more scandalous theories. Clara endured it all with surprising calm. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. She had a secret burning inside her, like a fire warming her even in her captivity. She'd found something worth fighting for, someone worth any price, and she wasn't giving that up without a fight of her own. For 3 weeks, Clara remained trapped within the fort's walls, watching from her window as the world carried on without her. Spring was giving way to early summer, and the desert bloomed defiantly, wildflowers painting the landscape in bursts of color. She wondered if Zane still went to the waterfall, if he waited for her, or if he'd given up hope of seeing her again. The not knowing was its own kind of torture, worse in some ways than her father's stern lectures or the pained glances from the other officers' wives. Maura became Clara's only link to the outside world. The maid brought more than meals to Clara's room. She brought gossip carefully edited to leave nothing out. More patrols going out. Maura said one afternoon, setting down a tea tray, "Your father's convinced there's going to be an attack. He's tripled the guards, brought in reinforcements from Fort Stanton." Clara's hands stilled on the book she'd been pretending to read. What kind of attack? Coordinated, they're saying. Multiple Apache bands working together. Maura's voice dropped to a whisper. There's talk of a traitor, someone feeding information to the savages. The word made Clara flinch. Savages. As if Zane and his people were less than human. As if centuries of occupation gave the soldiers the right to call the original inhabitants of this land monsters. Don't call them that, Clara said quietly. Maura's eyebrows rose. Miss Clara. They're people, Maura. People defending their homes. Clara met the maid's gaze. Have you ever wondered if we're the invaders? If maybe we're the ones in the wrong? The older woman's face paled. You can't say such things. If anyone heard, I know. I'm sorry. Clara rubbed her temples, exhaustion settling over her like a heavy cloak. I'm going mad in here. That's all. But Maura studied her with new understanding, her eyes sharp. It's not madness making you talk like that. It's something else. Someone else. Clara's silence was all the answer Maura needed. Oh, child. Maura sank onto the edge of the bed. What have you done? The whole story poured out of the waterfall of the meetings of Zane. Clara spoke of him, not as the fearsome warrior the soldier saw, but as the man who shared his dreams with her, who kissed her with a tenderness that contradicted everything she'd been taught about Apache savagery. Maura listened without interruption, her face growing more grave with each word. When Clara finally fell silent, Maura was quiet for a long moment. You love him, Maura said finally. It wasn't a question. Yes, the admission felt like both relief and doom. I know it's impossible. I know there's no future in it. But Maura, when I'm with him, I finally understand what it means to be alive. Everything else is just existing. And him. Does he feel the same? Clara thought of Zane's face as he'd kissed her goodbye, of the way his voice had broken when he'd called her his beautiful dreamer. Yes, I think so, maybe. Maura was quiet again, her weathered hands folded in her lap. I was in love once, with a man my father said wasn't good enough, a stable hand of all things. My father was a judge, wealthy, respected. He forbade us to see each other. What happened, I married the man my father chose, a lawyer, very suitable. We had 30 years together before he died, and he was a good man, kind, steady. But I never loved him, not the way I loved Thomas. Mora's eyes grew distant with memory. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd been brave enough to follow my heart. Are you saying I should? I'm saying nothing, child. This choice is yours and yours alone. But I'll tell you this. Love like that doesn't come often. Most people live their whole lives without feeling what you're describing. Mora stood smoothing her skirts. Whatever you decide, I won't betray you. But be careful. Your father's men are on high alert. If they catch you sneaking out again. She didn't need to finish. They both knew the consequences would be severe. That evening, Clara stood at her window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere beyond those walls, Zane was watching the same sky. She pressed her palm against the glass, willing her thoughts to reach him across the distance. I'm here. I haven't forgotten. I'm trying to find a way back to you. Her opportunity came from an unexpected source. Colonel Ward's son, whose name Clara had learned was Jake, turned out to be more observant than she'd given him credit for. 2 weeks into her confinement, he requested an audience with Sheriff Bartholomew Cole. Sir, with respect, keeping Miss Hayes locked away is only feeding the gossip. Jake's voice carried clearly through the sheriff's office door, where Clara happened to be passing. Let me escort her on a supervised ride, Jake continued. It will quell the rumors and show that everything is normal. Clara pressed herself against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. The situation is too dangerous, her father began. We'll stay close to the fort. Bring a full escort. 4 soldiers, well armed. There's a beautiful view of the mountains, just 3 miles north, perfect for a picnic and clearly visible from the walls. Jake's tone was earnest. Your daughter needs air, sir. And with all due respect, if you're hoping for a match between us, I need an opportunity to court her properly. The silence stretched between them. Clara could imagine her father's face, the calculations running behind his eyes, weighing security against social necessity. Very well, he said finally. But 6 soldiers, not 4, and you'll be back before sunset. Clara's heart soared. A supervised ride wasn't the freedom she craved, but it was something. A crack in the prison walls. The next morning, she dressed carefully in her riding habit, her mind already planning. The northern route Jake had mentioned passed within a mile of the canyon entrance. If she could slip away for even 15 minutes, she'd be free. But when she saw the escort assembled in the courtyard, her hope dimmed. 6 soldiers, all hardened veterans, watched the landscape with constant vigilance, and Jake himself, who seemed genuinely pleased to be spending time with her. Miss Hayes. Jake greeted her with a bow. You look lovely today. Thank you, Mr. Ward. Clara forced a smile. She couldn't fault him for her kindness. He'd secured her release, after all. It's good to be outdoors again. They rode at an easy pace, the soldiers maintaining a loose perimeter around them. Jake proved to be surprisingly good company, educated, well-read, with a dry humor that occasionally made Clara smile despite her distraction. I've read your father's concerns about you, he said as they climbed a gentle rise. He worries you're too independent for your own good. Clara stiffened. He told you that? Not in those words. But I understand his fear. This is dangerous country, Miss Hayes. A woman alone, particularly a beautiful one, is vulnerable. I'm quite capable of taking care of myself. I don't doubt it. Jake smiled. But independence and safety aren't always compatible, especially not here. They reached the viewpoint he'd described, a flat mesa with a spectacular view of the Sangre de Cristo range, the mountains rising like ancient gods against the sky, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. while the soldiers set up a simple picnic and kept watch. Jake helped Clara dismount. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. "Yes." But Clara wasn't looking at the mountains. Her eyes were on the landscape below, searching for the canyon entrance. There it was, perhaps a mile distant, a shadow in the earth that most people would never notice. Was Zane down there? Could he see them from the rocks, Miss Hayes? Jake's voice recalled her attention. "You seem distracted. Forgive me, I'm just grateful to be outside again." They sat on a blanket. Jake poured wine with practiced elegance. He talked about Washington, about his plans for the future, about the civilizing work the army was doing in the territories. Clara made appropriate responses while her mind raced. The soldiers were relaxed, confident. They saw this as a simple escort duty, nothing dangerous. The open mesa offered clear sightlines in all directions, no chance of ambush. But that also meant no chance of slipping away unnoticed. Clara was contemplating excuses, perhaps claiming she needed privacy for a delicate female matter, when one of the soldiers called out, "Movement in the rocks, southwest quadrant." Instantly, all 6 men had weapons drawn. Jake pulled Clara behind him, his own revolver appearing as if by magic. "Get the lady mounted. Wait." Clara tried to see past the soldiers, her heart hammering. It might be nothing. But it wasn't nothing. 3 Apache warriors emerged from the rocks, below, their hands raised in what could have been a gesture of peace, or perhaps mockery. They were too far away to identify clearly, but Clara strained her eyes, searching for Zane's distinctive height and bearing. "Hold fire," Jake commanded, though his weapon remained trained on the warriors. "They're not attacking." Yet one of the soldiers muttered. The Apache remained still, watching the group on the mesa. Then with deliberate slowness, they retreated back into the rocks and disappeared. "We're leaving," Jake said firmly. The ride back to the fort was tense, every man expecting an ambush that never came. When they finally reached the fort's gates, Clara felt both relief and disappointment. She had been outside the walls, but no closer to Zane. That night, lying in her bed, she replayed the moment over and over. Had one of those warriors been Zane? Had he seen her, recognized her despite the distance, or was he somewhere else entirely believing she'd abandoned him? The uncertainty was its own kind of torture, worse than the soldier's watchful eyes or the whispers of her father's officers. 3 days later, Maura brought news that changed everything. "There was an incident last night," she said quietly, helping Clara dress. "A sentry on the east wall was found unconscious. When he woke, he claimed an Apache had knocked him out, but left him alive." Clara's hands stilled as she buttoned her dress. "Left something, too." Maura reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in leather. "This," she said, unwrapping it carefully. "He said it was lying on his chest when he came to. The captain took it, but I saw it first." She revealed a small carved bird, a hawk, its wings spread in flight. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each feather detailed with patient precision. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She reached for it and then stopped herself. "Why are you showing me this?" Maura's eyes met hers. "Because carved on the bottom is a single word: Woodville." Clara took the carving with trembling hands. On the base, scratched into the wood, was her surname. But there was something else too. A pattern of notches along one wing. 7 deep marks, then 3 shallow ones. 7 days and 3 hours. Was he telling her when to meet him? "Your father has it now," Maura continued. "He's convinced it's some kind of threat. He's doubling the guards again, restricting all movement after sunset. 7 days from when Clara asked urgently, "When did this happen?" 2 nights ago. 5 days then. 5 days to figure out how to escape a fort on high alert and reach the waterfall. It was impossible. Clara stared at the tiny carved hawk, running her thumb over its smooth surface. Zane had risked everything to send her this message. He'd knocked out a sentry, infiltrated the fort itself. If he'd been caught, he would have been killed on sight. He was risking everything for her. Could she do less? I need your help, Clara told Mora quietly. I know. The older woman's face was resigned but determined. Tell me what you need. The plan was simple, which meant it was probably foolish. But Clara had run out of options. On the 5th night, she complained of a severe headache and retired early. Mora helped her into bed, making a show of concern that any guard might observe through the partially open door. Once darkness fell completely, Mora brought a sleeping draught, or rather, a cup that smelled of the herbs used in such brews. Drink this, Miss Clara, Mora said loudly. It will help you rest. Clara drank the harmless tea, then settled into bed. Mora blew out the candles and left, closing the door behind her. The guard outside, a young private named Chen, had been on duty since before sunset and would be there until midnight. Clara waited an hour, lying still and breathing deeply as if asleep. Then, moving with infinite care, she rose and began to dress. Not in her usual riding habit, but in a simple cotton dress and her brother's old boots. She tied her hair back in a plain braid and wrapped a dark shawl around her shoulders. The window was her only exit. It opened onto the mansion's side garden, which butted up against the fort's inner wall. The wall was 15 feet high, impossible to climb without help. But Clara had help. Or rather, she'd made help. Over the past 3 days, she'd stolen rope from the supply warehouse during her closely monitored walks, hiding it in segments under loose floorboards in her room. Now she tied the pieces together with knots her mother had taught her, sailing knots designed to hold under strain. The window opened silently. She'd been oiling the hinges with butter stolen from her dinner trays. Clara lowered the rope, securing one end to the heavy bed frame. The other end disappeared into the darkness below. She was halfway out the window when she heard voices. Strange movement in the garden. Better check it out. Clara froze, her heart hammering. The rope swayed beneath her weight. If she climbed back up, the rope would be discovered. If she continued down, she might be caught. She continued down. The rope burned her palms as she descended faster than was safe. 6 feet from the ground, her hands slipped. She fell, crashing hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. Stars exploded across her vision. Move. Get up. Move. Clara forced herself to her feet, ignoring the pain shooting through her ankle. The garden was small but well kept, offering just enough concealment. She duck-walked between rose bushes, thorns catching at her dress. There by the entrance, a lantern appeared. Clara pressed herself against the wall, making herself as small as possible. The light swept past her hiding spot, once, then twice. The lantern moved away. Nothing here must have been a cat. Clara didn't allow herself to breathe until the voices faded completely. Then she moved along the wall, searching in the darkness for the spot Mora had described. There it was, a drainage grate, rusted and loose. It was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, but it emptied into the fort's waste ditch on the other side of the wall. The smell was unbearable. Clara didn't care. She pushed through the grate, scraping her arms and shoulders in her haste, and dropped into the shallow ditch beyond. She was outside the fort, the night air tasting like freedom. Clara climbed out of the ditch and paused, orienting herself. The moon was high and bright, too bright for comfort. Anyone looking would be able to see her clearly. She ran anyway, keeping low, using every scrap of cover the terrain offered. Sagebrush, rock outcroppings, shadows. She moved from one to the next like a ghost. Her heart pounded so hard she feared it might burst. The canyon entrance appeared ahead. Clara pushed herself faster despite the pain in her ankle. She was limping now, each step sending jolts of agony up her leg. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except reaching the waterfall, except reaching him. The canyon walls rose around her, familiar and welcoming. The sound of falling water grew louder. Clara rounded the final bend and stopped, gasping for breath. He was there. Zane stood by the pool, his face turned toward the sound of her approach. When he saw her, his expression transformed, shock giving way to joy, then concern as he took in her disheveled state. "Clara," he breathed, and she ran to him. He caught her, his arms closing around her like a sanctuary. Clara buried her face in his shoulder, her whole body shaking with reaction relief, and something too big to name. "I'm here," she gasped. "I got your message. I'm here." Zane held her so tightly she could barely breathe, his face pressed into her hair. "I didn't think you'd be able to come. I hoped, but I didn't dare believe. I'm here." She pulled back just enough to see his face, her hands framing his jaw. "I'm here and I'm not leaving. Not ever." His eyes searched hers, and Clara saw the moment he understood. Saw him realize she wasn't talking about just this night. "Clara, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't go back, won't go back." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I'll run with you, live in the mountains, learn your ways. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please, please don't send me away. Your father will never understand. He'll never accept this." Clara's voice broke. "I know what I'm giving up, Zane. My family, my home, everything I've ever known. But I also know what I'm choosing. You, us. A chance at real freedom, real life." Zane cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "Do you understand what you're asking for?" His voice was rough now. "Life with the Apache is hard. We're constantly moving, constantly hunted. There's no luxury, no safety, no guarantee of tomorrow. I don't need luxury. I need you. You'll be seen as a traitor by your people. They'll hunt you as they hunt us. I know. There's no going back from this, no changing your mind. I know." Clara pressed her forehead to his. "I've been a prisoner my whole life, Zane. A beautiful, comfortable prisoner, but a prisoner nonetheless. You showed me what freedom feels like. How can you expect me to return to my cage?" Zane was silent for a long moment, his eyes closed. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I love you. I didn't want to. Tried to fight it. But I love you, Clara Hayes, and I think I have since the first moment I saw you in this water." The words unlocked something inside Clara. "I love you too. So much it terrifies me." Zane kissed her then, deep and fierce and filled with all the desperation and hope they'd both been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both of them trembling. "We need to leave now," Zane said urgently. "Your father will discover you're gone by morning. They'll search the canyon. They know about this place from old Apache scouts. We need to be deep into the mountains before dawn. I'm ready. You have nothing. No supplies, no proper clothes. I have you." Clara managed a shaky smile. "Everything else will figure itself out." Zane studied her face as if trying to memorize every detail. Then he nodded. "Decision made. All right, we go now and we go fast. Can you ride?" "I twisted my ankle getting over the wall, but I can manage." His jaw tightened. "I'll tend to it when we stop. Come." He led her to where 2 horses waited in the shadows, his own and a smaller mare, clearly brought for her. Clara mounted awkwardly, her injured ankle protesting, and Zane swung onto his horse with fluid grace. "Stay close," he said. "And if I tell you to run, you run. No questions, no hesitation. I understand." They rode out of the canyon and into the night, heading north toward the high mountains. Behind them, Fort Sumner lay in the stillness of night, unaware of what it had lost. Ahead of them lay a land unknown, dangerous, and absolutely free. Clara didn't look back. They rode through the night, climbing steadily into terrain that grew rougher with each mile. Zane set a punishing pace, stopping only once to bind Clara's swollen ankle with strips torn from his own shirt. His hands were gentle but efficient, and when he finished, he pressed a brief kiss to her forehead. "Can you continue?" "Yes." Clara's entire body ached, but she refused to complain. She'd made her choice, and she would see it through. By the time the first gray light touched the eastern sky, they were deep in the mountains, surrounded by pines that smelled of resin and wilderness. Zane finally slowed, guiding them off the trail into a narrow defile hidden by rock and scrub. "We'll rest here a few hours," he said quietly. "It's defensible and we're high enough that we'll see anyone approaching." Clara dismounted carefully, her legs trembling with fatigue. Zane caught her as she stumbled, supporting her weight effortlessly. "Easy, you've done well, better than most soldiers would have. Where are we going?" "To my band's summer camp. It's another 2 days' ride into the high country." Zane helped her sit on a fallen log, then began tending to the horses. "But we can't go directly. Your father will send trackers, probably Apache scouts who work for the fort. We need to lay a false trail first." Clara watched him work, marveling at his economy of movement, the way he seemed to blend with the landscape itself. In the growing light, she could see details she'd missed at the waterfall, the scars on his back visible through his vest, the way his long hair caught the dawn breeze, the lean strength in every muscle. This was real. She'd actually done it. Escaped from her father, from the fort, from everything she'd known. She should be terrified. She should be questioning her decision, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. But instead she felt lighter than she had in years. "Are you hungry?" Zane produced dried meat and what looked like pressed berries from his pack. "It's not much, but it'll sustain you." They ate in companionable silence, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of rose and gold. Clara tried the dried meat cautiously, finding it tough but flavorful. The berry mixture was sweet and surprisingly good. "What are they called?" she asked, holding up a piece of the berry cake. "Pemmican. It's made from buffalo meat fat and dried berries. It lasts months without spoiling." Zane smiled slightly. "You'll be eating a lot of it." "I don't mind." Clara took another bite to prove it. "Zane, about your people, when we reach them, will they accept me?" His smile faded. "Honestly, I don't know. Some will be angry that I brought a white woman into our camp. Others will be curious, willing to wait and see. But Clara, you need to understand you'll have to prove yourself. You can't be the general's daughter anymore. You'll need to work to learn our ways, to show that you're committed." "I am committed. I know. But it's one thing to say it in the moment, another to live it day after day." Zane moved to sit beside her. "There are women in my band who've lost husbands, sons, daughters to soldiers. They'll look at you and see the enemy. You'll need patience. I'll have it." Clara took his hand, twining their fingers. Teach me your language, your customs, everything. I want to understand your world." Zane lifted their joined hands, pressing a kiss to Clara's knuckles. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most foolish. Perhaps both." They rested for 3 hours, taking turns sleeping, while the other kept watch. When they set out again, the sun was high and merciless. Zane led them on a winding path through the mountains, doubling back and crossing streams to confuse any trackers. Twice they heard voices in the distance, search parties probably. Each time Zane guided them deeper into the wilderness, taking paths that seemed impossible for horses, but which he navigated with a casual expertise. On the second day, they stopped by a small lake so clear Clara could see fish darting beneath the surface. Zane filled their water skins while Clara washed her face and struggled to tame her wildly tangled hair. Then from his pack, Zane produced a brush, made from some kind of stiff plant fibers. "Let me," he said. Clara sat still while Zane worked the tangles free with surprising gentleness. His fingers in her hair felt intimate, more so somehow than even their kisses had been. This was domestic, real. "I'm going to braid it," Zane said. "Apache style. It'll be more practical for riding." His fingers worked with practiced skill, dividing her hair into sections and weaving them together in an intricate pattern. When he was done, Clara touched the braid wonderingly. It felt secure, pulled back from her face in a way that would indeed be better for hard travel. "Thank you. You'll need proper clothes soon." Zane studied her torn dress with a critical eye. And moccasins. Those boots won't last in the mountains. I don't care what I wear. You will when winter comes. The high country gets cold snow deeper than a man is tall. But we'll teach you. My aunt is skilled with leather and weaving. She'll help you. Clara noticed the casual way he said, "We'll teach you," including her in the future, tense as if it were already settled. The assumption warmed her. They rode on as the day waned. The landscape grew more dramatic, towering cliffs, deep canyons, forests so thick the sun barely penetrated. Clara saw deer watching them from the shadows, heard the cry of eagles overhead. As night fell, they made camp in a small cave partway up a cliff face. Zane built a tiny fire in the back where the smoke would dissipate before escaping, then prepared a simple meal of cornmeal cakes cooked on flat stones. "Tomorrow we'll reach my people," he said, handing Clara a still warm cake. "I need to prepare you for what to expect." Clara set down her food, giving him her full attention. "My band is small, perhaps 40 people, including children. We move with the seasons, following game and avoiding soldiers. Life is simple, but not easy. Everyone works. Everyone contributes." Zane paused, choosing his words carefully. "The women will teach you their skills cooking our way, preparing hides, gathering plants. You'll need to learn quickly. And Clara, you can't be offended if they test you at first. If they give you the hardest tasks, the most tedious work, it's their way of seeing if you're serious. I understand. There's another thing." Zane's eyes met hers steadily. "I'm not just any warrior, I'm a war leader. People look to me for guidance, for protection. If I bring you into camp as my woman, they'll expect us to be bound properly, by Apache custom." Clara's heart began to beat faster. "You mean married similar? We call it a joining ceremony. It's simple." He took her hand. "I'm not asking you to decide now. You should meet my people first. See what you're truly committing to. But I wanted you to know that I'm serious about this, about us. I don't intend to let you go." The fierce possession in his voice made Clara shiver, not with fear, but with something else. "I don't intend to be let go." Zane pulled her close and they sat by the tiny fire. His arms wrapped around her from behind. Clara leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Tell me about your aunt," she said quietly, and the others. "Help me know them, before I meet them." So he did. Zane spoke of his Aunt Lark, who'd helped raise him after his mother died. She was sharp-tongued and fierce, but fair. He spoke of his cousin Flint, a young warrior with more enthusiasm than sense. Of a pony, a child of 7, who'd lost both parents to a raid and whom the whole band had adopted. Clara listened, building a picture in her mind of the community she was joining. These weren't the faceless savages of Fort Sumner. They were people complex, flawed, bound by love duty, and the desperate need to survive in a world that wanted them gone. "I'm afraid," Clara admitted finally. "Not of your people exactly, but of failing them, of failing you. Then we'll be afraid together." Zane turned Clara to face him, his gaze intense. "Because I'm terrified too. Terrified that bringing you to my people will put them at risk, that your father will find you and kill anyone who helped hide you. That I'm being selfish, choosing my heart over their safety." "Do you regret it?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No." His answer was immediate. "I should, but I don't. Is that wrong?" Clara thought of her father, of Mara, of the life she'd left behind. She should feel guilt, should mourn what she'd lost. But all she felt was relief and a wild, fierce joy. "If it is, then we're both wrong. And I don't care." They made love that night for the first time on a blanket spread over the cave floor, with the fire casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. It was gentle and fierce, both of them, aware they were claiming each other in a way that went beyond words or vows. Afterward, Clara lay in Zane's arms, feeling the cool night air on her skin, listening to the distant cry of night birds. "I never imagined I could feel this way. This free, This real. You are real. Zane's hand traced patterns on her shoulder. The most real thing I've ever known. They slept tangled together, and Clara's dreams were of flying, soaring above mountains and canyons with nothing holding her down. The Apache camp revealed itself gradually as they descended from the high passes. First came the smell of smoke from cook fires, then the sound of children's laughter, and finally the sight of Wikiup's dome-shaped dwellings, covered in brush and hides scattered among the pines. People stopped their work to watch as Zane and Clara rode in. Clara felt the weight of dozens of eyes, saw suspicion and curiosity in equal measure. An older woman, Lark Clara guessed from Zane's description, stood with crossed arms, her weathered face unreadable. Zane dismounted and helped Clara down. He spoke in Apache, his voice carrying to the gathered crowd. Clara understood nothing of the words, but she heard her name, heard the tone of pride and challenge in Zane's voice. Lark responded, her voice sharp, and an argument erupted quickly, heated and fast. Other voices joined in, some angry, others questioning. Through it all, Zane remained steady, his hand on Clara's back, a constant reassurance. Finally, an ancient man emerged from one of the larger Wikiups. His hair was white as snow, his face a map of wrinkles, but his eyes were sharp and clear. Everyone fell silent as he approached. He studied Clara for a long moment before speaking to Zane, in a voice that rasped like wind through dry grass. Zane responded, and the old man's eyebrows rose. He asked another question, listened to the answer, then unexpectedly laughed. The sound broke the tension. Others began to laugh too, and Lark's stern expression cracked into something that might have been amusement. "What did he say?" Clara whispered. "He asked why I'd bring the general's daughter to our camp," Zane said. "I told him because she chose us over him, which means she's smarter than any soldier." Zane smiled. "He said anyone who would leave comfort for hardship must be either crazy or blessed. And blessed crazy people are good luck." The old man spoke again, gesturing toward Clara with a gnarled hand. "He says you may stay, but you must prove yourself worthy. He's assigned you to Lark's care. She'll teach you our ways." Zane squeezed her hand. "Fair warning, she's not gentle." Lark approached, sizing Clara up with a critical eye. She said something that made Zane wince. "She says you look soft as an uncooked cake and probably won't last a week. She's looking forward to proving herself right." Clara straightened her spine and met the older woman's gaze directly. Then carefully she bowed her head in the respectful gesture Zane had taught her. "Thank you for taking me into your home." Lark's eyes narrowed, but Clara thought she saw approval there. The woman gestured sharply for Clara to follow. "Go," Zane murmured. "Show her what you're made of. I'll see you at sunset." Clara followed Lark to a Wikiup where several women sat working. They looked up as she approached, their expressions ranging from hostile to curious. Lark spoke rapidly, and the women laughed, not cruelly, but with the shared amusement of people facing a ridiculous situation. Then the older woman thrust a basket into Clara's hands and gestured toward the surrounding forest. "I think she wants me to gather something," Clara said hesitantly. One of the younger women, barely more than a girl, spoke in halting English. "Roots for cooking that plant," she said, pointing to a leafy specimen growing nearby. "Lark says if you cannot find food, you cannot eat." It was clearly a test. Clara nodded and headed into the forest, the basket heavy in her hands. She had no idea what she was looking for, but she would figure it out. Failure wasn't an option. The first weeks were brutal. Clara quickly learned that sympathy and romance had no place in daily survival. The Apache way of life demanded constant work, gathering, preparing food, treating hides, maintaining tools and shelters. Every moment was filled with tasks that left her hands blistered and her back aching. Lark was relentless. She showed Clara how to do each task exactly, once then expected perfection. Every time Clara failed, and she failed often. At first, Lark's disgust was evident, and the older woman would assign her even more work. Scraping hides felt like a torturous battle. Clara's soft hands used to delicate tasks like needlepoint and piano keys bled within days. Gathering firewood left splinters embedded in her palms. Cooking over an open fire meant constant minor burns, and all of it was done while she tried to learn a language that seemed to have no pattern or structure. But Clara refused to quit. She watched the other women, obsessively memorizing their techniques. She practiced Apache words while she worked, earning patient corrections from the younger women and derisive snorts from Lark. When her hands bled, she wrapped them and kept working. When her back screamed in protest, she ignored it. Zane saw her struggle, but he couldn't intervene. To do so would undermine her in the eyes of the band. He could only offer comfort at night. When they lay together in the small wickiup he'd built for them at the camp's edge, he'd whisper words of encouragement. "You don't have to prove anything," he murmured one night, seeing the fresh blisters on her hands. "Yes, I do." Clara's voice was hoarse from exhaustion. "Not to you, but to them, to myself. I need to know I can do this, that I didn't make a mistake." "Did you?" Zane's fingers traced her face. "Make a mistake?" Clara thought of the endless work, the suspicious stares, and the constant struggle to communicate. She thought of Lark's grudging approval when she finally managed to scrape a hide properly, of Little Fox's shy smile, when Clara had shared her meager dinner portion with the little girl of the sunrise over the mountains. She watched each morning in absolute freedom. "No," she said firmly. "No mistake. Just growing pains." By the end of the second week, something shifted. Clara successfully started a fire using the Apache method, striking flint against a special stone to create sparks that caught on dried grass. The women watching her erupted in surprised approval, and even Lark allowed a small smile. That evening, the old woman presented Clara with a pair of moccasins, beautifully crafted with intricate beadwork. "For the girl who doesn't quit," she said in halting English, even when she should. Tears pricked Clara's eyes. She accepted the gift with both hands, bowing her head in thanks. The third week brought new challenges. Lark began teaching her about plants, what was edible, what had medicinal properties, and what was poison. They would walk for hours through the mountains, the older woman pointing and naming things, while Clara struggled to remember it all. One afternoon, they encountered a rattlesnake on the trail. Clara froze, terror flooding through her, but Lark calmly picked up a forked stick, pinned the snake's head, and deftly severed it with her knife. "Good meat," she said, holding up the still twitching body. "You cook tonight." Clara swallowed her revulsion and nodded. That evening she served the snake, which to her surprise wasn't terrible. The other women praised her courage, and Clara felt a swell of pride that rivaled anything she'd felt, earning honors at her fancy Eastern school. But it was the children who finally completed her integration into the band. Little Fox in particular attached herself to Clara. The small girl had lost her parents 6 months earlier in a raid, and rarely spoke. But she began following Clara around the camp, watching with solemn dark eyes as the white woman struggled with her tasks. One evening, Clara was attempting to braid yucca fibers into rope, a task that required patience and skill she didn't yet possess. Little Fox sat beside her silently for several minutes, then reached out and gently corrected Clara's hand position. Clara met the child's eyes, and something passed between them, a bond and understanding. Two souls who'd lost their worlds and were building new ones. "Thank you," Clara said softly in Apache. The words were still clumsy on her tongue, but Little Fox smiled. After that, the girl became Clara's shadow, teaching her both language and customs. She would demonstrate techniques, fetch water without being asked, and curl up beside Clara during evening storytelling sessions. When the other children saw Little Fox's acceptance, they followed. Soon Clara found herself surrounded by curious youngsters, all eager to teach the strange white woman their games and words. By the fourth week, Lark declared Clara ready to learn riding Apache style. "You ride like a white woman," the elder said with disdain, slow week. "Apache women ride like warriors." What followed was the most terrifying and exhilarating experience of Clara's life. Lark put her on a spirited mare with no saddle, only a simple blanket and basic bridle. Then she sent Clara galloping across an open meadow, shouting instructions in rapid Apache. Clara clung to the horse's back, her thighs burning with the effort to maintain her seat. She fell twice, earning bruises that would last for days. But the third time something clicked. She found her balance learned to move with the horse rather than against it. By sunset she was galloping alongside the younger women, her hair flying free and a wild joy singing in her blood. That night the band held a small feast to celebrate the summer's first successful hunt. Zane had led a party that brought down 2 deer, ensuring the camp would have meat for days. The fire flickered brightly, casting long shadows on the gathered crowd as drummers began to beat their rhythmic pulses, filling the air with the pulse of tradition. Clara sat beside Zane, her heart swelling with a new sense of belonging. For the first time since she had arrived, she felt truly part of this world. White Moon approached her presence, commanding attention. She gestured for Clara to stand. The elder spoke something in Apache, and the entire camp fell into a hushed silence. "She's asking if you're ready," Zane murmured softly, his voice low and steady. "Ready to be bound to me to take your place as an Apache woman." Clara's gaze swept over the faces watching her, some curious, some approving, and a few still skeptical. She thought of everything she had endured over the past month. The work, the struggles, the losses, but also the things she had gained. "Yes," she replied firmly in Apache, her voice clear. "I am ready." White Moon nodded in approval, and the elder motioned for both Zane and Clara to step forward, closer to the fire. The ceremony was simple yet profound. The elder spoke in the ancient tongue, his words flowing like a song. White Moon took a beautiful blanket, intricately woven, and draped it over their shoulders, binding them together. Zane's voice rose clear and steady as he spoke to the gathered crowd. Clara didn't understand all the words, but she heard her name. She heard the pride and intensity in Zane's voice. When the elder gestured to her, Clara spoke from the heart. "I came to this place broken," she said in halting Apache, "a prisoner of my own life. Zane showed me freedom. You showed me strength. I promise to honor your ways, to protect your people as my own, to stand with you against any who would harm you." Her words weren't perfect, but as she spoke, several faces softened, and no one laughed. Instead, there was a silence, and from the crowd, a woman began to sing. One by one, others joined in their voices, rising together in harmony. The elder lifted a pottery cup, offering it first to Zane, then to Clara. They both drank the herbal tea, bitter, but not unpleasant. The blanket was then removed from their shoulders, and the elder declared them bound. The celebration continued long into the night. People danced, sang, shared stories, and feasted. Children ran freely between the wickiups, their laughter bright and unburdened. Clara danced too clumsy at first, but with growing confidence as the women taught her the steps. When she was breathless and laughing, Zane pulled her away from the crowd. They walked to the edge of camp where the land fell away, revealing the vast moonlit mountains stretching endlessly before them. "Are you happy?" Zane asked quietly, his voice full of wonder. Clara thought carefully. Her hands were calloused, her skin darkened by the sun. She wore simple buckskin now, no longer silk. Her days were filled with hard work, no more needlepoint or tea parties. She would never see her father again, nor return to the world she had known. Yes, she said, her heart full, and she meant it with everything she had. "I'm free, Zane. For the first time in my life, I'm truly free." Zane pulled her close, his arms tight around her, as they stood together watching the stars wheel overhead. Behind them, the camp continued to celebrate the songs rising into the night air. Clara thought briefly of her father, wondering if he still searched for her, or if he'd given her up for dead. She hoped he believed. The latter hoped he'd found some peace in that. She'd left him a note, short final. "I'm sorry, Father, but I can't be the daughter you want. I have to be myself, even if it means losing you." Try to understand and please don't look for me. She signed it with love because despite everything, she did love him, but not enough to sacrifice her soul for his expectations. What are you thinking? Zane asked, his voice soft. That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Clara said, turning in his arms to face him. That this is home. Yes. Zane's smile was brighter than the moon. Yes, it is. 2 years later, the autumn sun hung low over the camp painting, everything in shades of amber and gold. Clara, now known to the band as Springbird for her fearless riding, sat outside her wickiup, working on a new pair of moccasins. Her hands, once soft and useless, now moved with practiced skill as she pierced the leather and drew sinew through in tiny, even stitches. Little Fox, now 9 and chattering constantly, sat beside her, showing Clara beadwork patterns. The girl had become like a daughter to Clara and Zane. She slept in their wickiup, calling them mother and father in the casual way Apache children did, knowing that family was made through love, not just blood. The blue ones here, Little Fox instructed in Apache, then red, then white. It makes the pattern like water flowing. Clara nodded carefully, threading the beads. Her Apache was fluent now, though she still sometimes struggled with complex grammatical structures. She thought in a mixture of English and Apache these days, and she dreamed in both languages. The sound of horses made her look up. Zane was returning from a hunting trip with several other men. They'd been gone for 3 days, ranging far into the high country. His face lit up with a smile when he saw her, and Clara felt the familiar flutter in her chest, something that 2 years together had done nothing to diminish. He dismounted and crossed to Tier, pulling her up into a kiss that made Little Fox giggle and cover her eyes. I missed you, Zane murmured against her lips. I missed you too. Did you have any luck today? Zane asked, his deep voice cutting through the quiet evening. Clara smiled, holding up the catch of the day. 2 elk and a big horn sheep. We'll eat well this winter. She looked down at the moccasins she was finishing, the soft leather slipping through her fingers. Those are beautiful. For a pony? Zane inquired. For you, Clara replied, her voice playful, as she held them up to check the size. Your old ones are falling apart. You're spoiling me. Zane teased, his voice warm. Always. White Moon emerged from the nearby wickiup, her voice full of mischief as she called out, If we're going to make more babies, we should do it in private so we don't scandalize the children. Clara blushed, but couldn't help the laughter that escaped her. It had been 2 years since she'd had a child. The first, a tragic miscarriage, had nearly broken them both. But the second had brought them a healthy son, Running Wolf, who was now napping inside their wickiup. Life wasn't easy for their band. They moved constantly, always staying 1 step ahead of the army patrols and settlers who pushed deeper into their lands. Close calls were frequent. Scouts spotted camps hurriedly abandoned, but they survived. The threat of violence never left them, but neither did joy. Clara had found a new sense of purpose among the Apache. They had accepted her, even when there was no reason to. She'd learned to gather medicinal plants, preserve meat, track game, and read the weather. She could build a wickiup in hours, start a fire in minutes, and ride better than most of the men. But more than survival, she'd found love. Not just the romantic kind with Zane, but the deep, unshakable love of family. White Moon had become the mother she had lost years ago. A pony was like a daughter to her, and Running Wolf was the future they had built together. That evening, as the band gathered around the fire for their meal, Clara held Running Wolf in her arms. The flames flickered and danced before her, the heat warming her face as Zane sat beside her. A pony nestled between them, and all around them, familiar faces. Faces she knew, stories she understood, smiled and laughed in the glow of the fire. Someone began to sing, and soon everyone was joining in. Clara added her voice to the chorus, the Apache words flowing easily now. Her gaze met White Moon's across the fire, and the older woman nodded in approval. Later, as Clara lay beside Zane in their wickiup, their children sleeping soundly nearby, she thought about the girl she once was, the girl trapped in silk and propriety, desperate for something real. What would she say to that girl now? Courage, Clara whispered to herself. Choose courage even when it terrifies you. Choose truth even when it costs everything. Choose love, especially when the world tells you it's impossible. Because on the other side of that terrifying leap is a life more real and beautiful than any cage, no matter how golden. Zane stirred beside her, pressing a soft kiss to her hair. What are you thinking about? He murmured. How lucky I am, Clara replied, turning to face him in the darkness. How grateful. I'm the lucky one, Zane said, his voice thick with emotion. You gave up everything and gained everything that matters. Clara kissed him softly. Never doubt that, Zane. Not for a moment. This is exactly where I'm meant to be, she whispered as the wind whispered through the pines outside, carrying the scent of winter. But inside the wickiup, warmth surrounded them, love, family, a life chosen freely and lived fully. As Clara closed her eyes, sleep slowly claimed her, her last thought, a simple prayer of gratitude. She had found love where she had least expected it, at a forbidden waterfall, with a man who had shown her what freedom truly meant. Tomorrow they would rise with the sun and face whatever challenges the day brought. They would work, laugh, worry, and hope. But they would do it together. And that Clara knew with absolute certainty was more than enough. It was everything. The end. Dear listener, some stories aren't meant to just be heard. They're meant to be felt. Tonight, as the stars settle above you like silent sentinels, remember this: it's never too late to choose freedom over fear. It's never too late to be seen for who you truly are, not by the expectations of others, but by the dreams your soul still longs to fulfill. Clara found love not in comfort but in courage. And to you, dear soul who has faced losses, embraced love and celebrated quiet victories, know that you are already the hero of 1,000 unwritten stories. You don't have to run through the desert to be brave. Simply getting up every day, offering kindness, loving through pain, that's a kind of strength deserving of reverence. Let your heart rest tonight. You've earned every moment of peace that comes with sleep. There's nothing you need to fix right now, no one you need to impress. Just you wrapped in the silence of grace under the sacred roof of another night survived. From the lands of the Wild West to wherever you are, may you feel safe, cherished, and ready to dream again. With warmth and endless gratitude, Wild West Lone Hearts. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. If it touched your heart even for a moment, we invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and share this story. Your support keeps us inspired to continue bringing you heartfelt tales of love, redemption, and unexpected turns, stories that honor the quiet strength in all of us. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you. At the end of this video, you'll find another story suggestion from our channel. Click it and be surprised by another emotional journey. With all our gratitude, Wild West Lone Hearts.